Well, the Boston Marathon bombings and the subsequent revelations about the suspects has raised some new questions about just how well the U.S. government is keeping us safe. According to the latest Fox News poll, a majority of Americans think homegrown terrorists are the greatest risk to our national security. Just 26% think Islamic terrorists are the greater threat. Now, that was a April 16th poll. The bombing was on the 15th. I'm not sure it fully takes into consideration the bombing, but some of it. Let's bring in our political insiders. John LeBoutillier, former Republican congressman for New York, Pat Caddell, a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter. Doug Schoen, he too a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for Bill Clinton. Let's begin with a very broad question. The events of this past week, what impact, if any, does that have in what's going on in Washington?
Well, let's allude to that first poll you put up there. There's a new category. Homegrown terrorists who may well be Islamic terrorists as well. Put another way, the issue of terrorism is back on the radar screen. Right. The issue of domestic security, and as I think we'll get to in a while, the issue of immigration. Bottom line, questions that had largely been quiescent are now front and center for the political class to deal with.
You know, Pat, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing in Congress at the FBI for failing to connect the dots when they were tipped off by the Russians that this older brother may have been radicalized and spent 6 months over there, maybe engaged in training.
We don't know everything yet, but let me just say, the years of illusion and self-delusion that this country has had, which we have seen remarkably. We saw it on Monday when we had David Axelrod say, oh, the president thinks it could be related to tax day. It reminds me of somebody, the mayor, when Bloomberg, when he said it could be Obamacare and the Times Square. Look, we have had this political correctness where we're not allowed to say. Pete King had hearings, Representative King had hearings on Homeland Security, on homegrown terrorism. He was attacked everywhere. Right. 3-1. I was involved with a poll. 3-1 people said that we should do it. The problem is the FBI, they missed this story. They're still covering up Benghazi as they did 40 years ago in Watergate. We don't know enough, but it all points to the same thing. Everything we said have been ignoring, whether it's Fort Hood, saying about, it was domestic, it was a workplace violence. All of that is crap. We are dealing with homegrown Islamic extremists, and we better get used to dealing with it and get real.
And that was a technical term you just used. John, look, the president is the guy who said, hey, Al-Qaeda's on the run here. Yeah. Whether these guys were radicalized abroad or homegrown here, there is a connection, it seems, to Islamic fundamentalism, radicalism.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say, I think for all three of us, we would say that the president did a marvelous job on Thursday in Boston.
Absolutely. I think we have to give him
and I would say from the minute the bombing happened, the police and the FBI were fantastic to identify these guys within 72 hours.
But that's not the issue.
No. The issue is to prevent the attack from happening.
And this is a president who said, we're beyond it now. They're on the run, as if to suggest it ain't going to happen, and it did.
But it's worse than that. We have the FBI taking Islamic terrorism out of their manuals, firing FBI agents who, quote, aren't sensitive enough to, on these issues. This is self-defeating.
I want to run through a couple of polls. Let's put up the other Fox News poll here. Willing to give up some personal freedom to reduce the threat of terrorism. Now, look at the differential here. In October of 2001, Americans were willing to give up just about everything. Now, only 43%.
Greg, there's been a sea change in public opinion before, and I emphasize before what happened in Boston. That is going to be revisited. Bottom line, there are questions now about trade-offs between security and liberty that our politicians and American voters are going to have to take into consideration. Put another way, there are huge new issues on the political landscape that are just being explored.
Rasmussen poll, let me ask you, John, about this. We'll put it up on the screen. Another terror attack in the next year, 71%, and this was taken after the bombing, 71% say it is at least somewhat likely.
Well, I think, why wouldn't it be?
Sure.
But again, I want to go back to the other point, which is the FBI did a great job catching them. They did not apparently do a great job when warned by the Russian intelligence services. What did they do? This is what we need to get to the bottom of, not just Pat's well-crafted questions every week about Benghazi. It's the same disease.
And those questions haven't been answered.
They haven't been answered, and we, the people, have a right to know what the FBI is doing and not doing, and why not.
Yeah, but they're very, very secretive, and there's not a lot of confidence in the U.S. government, whether it be the FBI or on Capitol Hill. Take a look at this Associated Press poll. How much of the time do you think you can trust the government in Washington to do what's right? Look at that. 67% say only some of the time.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really, it is so bad. 21% say basically a positive answer part of the time.
Well, that's pretty abysmal.
It is. 78% say basically not most of the time. Bottom line, all of this is going on in the context where people do not trust our government to do the right thing most of the time. That's just a fact.
One of the reasons the civil liberty numbers are what they are. But by the way, Greg, it's not just the government that's institutionally crippled. Look at the media. You can't get over Monday when the NPR gets out and says their counterterrorism expert says, oh, we know it must be somebody who's domestic right-winger because it's April.
And Salon magazine says, let's hope it's a white American. Imagine saying this.
But look at Philadelphia. Look at the abortion.
You guys really pay attention to Salon?
Well, no, but we pay attention to a media that's not responsive to the real-world problems all Americans face. This isn't ideology.
Philadelphia is a perfect example. You know what? Killing children. I don't care whether it's at Newtown, ought to be a big issue. But the mainstream media, because it involves an abortion clinic, let's not cover it. This is wrong. We have to give the American people.
I want to get your opinion when we come back from the break on a couple of other things. There have been a lot of calls over the last several days for tougher rules on visas and background checks for people immigrating to the United States. Is this going to accelerate those calls?
Oh, I think it has to, Greg. I mean, look, I'm personally still for comprehensive immigration reform. I think we got to get it done. We need a pathway to citizenship. But you'd be ignoring political reality not to say that given the horrific events of last week, that people were able to legally live here, become American citizens, have jihadist websites, and evade any sort of detection. This is a problem, and it's a problem for the legislation.
Senator Dan Coates said, we need to go slow on immigration reform. Grassley said, before we reform the system, we need to focus on who we let in.
Yes, well, look, we have a lot of immigration issues that are already emerged and will emerge. I think this is going to do real damage to the strive on immigration, and it should, because we don't do a very good job. I was, a week ago, I thought, well, we were on the right track. This has given us a dose of what Doug said, the real world reality that we haven't been dealing with. And this, if we said something that said something should happen to the president, the Secret Service would be down on our heads like mad. If you say, if a jihadist says, I'm a jihadist, kill all the Americans, it's a joke.
No, we don't care. You and I were talking during the commercial break that
correctness.
Not only tipped off by the FBI that this guy might be a radical jihadist, he's got a website, for goodness sakes, advocating jihad.
Posting. Now, I think we've got to look on immigration. Part of the deal that the Gang of Eight, which worries me, when 8 guys get in a room and craft a solution to everything.
800 pages worth.
Yeah. That part of it is the 11 million people who are here illegally will have a background check before they can get on track, right? Now, if the background check is anything like the one that was done on the older brother here, where the FBI came, this is in the New York Times, I presume it's accurate, they interviewed him and asked him, are you a radical? He said no. End of investigation.
Oh, that's good enough for us.
Yeah, okay.
See you later. Have a great day.
Yeah. Now, what I think we got to look at is Homeland Security, the FBI. Their job is to protect the country.
And John, there's another question that's raised by all of this. You can start and not be a jihadist. You can leave the country.
And become a jihadist.
And become a jihadist. There have to be follow-up.
And they went to Jihad Central, by the way, over near Chechnya and some of the other fundamental Islamic radical areas.
The other issue with immigration is we have had a presumption among a lot of people that it would be wonderful to have open borders in America, and that's essentially what we've had. The answer is that ain't going to work anymore. We're going to have a lot more.
Let me switch to the impact on the movement for greater gun control, background checks, assault weapons, and so on and so forth, and magazine clips. Here is the president after he lost just a few days ago. Take a look.
Do we really think that thousands of families whose lives have been shattered by gun violence don't have a right to weigh in on this issue? Do we think their emotions, their loss, is not relevant to this debate? So all in all, this was a pretty shameful day for Washington.
Shameful because people dared to disagree with the president, John.
I think that was all an act. I don't think Obama really applied himself the right way to get this thing passed. As the book that came out last year said, he was an amateur. He's an amateur when it comes to passing bills that are tough to pass.
He didn't do what good presidents do, which is lobby directly.
You've got to
the
work
US
every
senators.
senator. I think, and these two guys, I'm proud to share the stage with, have said all along that Obama would rather have short-term defeats to give him an issue to beat the Republicans in 2014.
So are you saying he was sort of happy that it went this way?
I think he was actually.
Really?
I think if he were doing his job on any of these issues, you know, it's the same story, the fiscal clip, everything. This is another example. We were talking about background checks. They could have gotten a deal, but he didn't work for it. He went out and started railing against everybody.
And the way you work
giving
for it,
speeches to adoring crowds and so forth.
We have a political crisis in this country. You saw it with the data that shows that government doesn't work. We didn't get a deal on guns. Immigration is problematic. Terrorism's an issue.
Much less the economy.
You worked for Bill Clinton.
I did.
Bill Clinton would have been on the phone in the middle of the night to every U.S. senator all night for days and days, and he would have gotten this passed.
And Bill Clinton was a can-do president, and Newt Gingrich a can-do speaker. And by the right now we have paralysis.
What you just said, Doug, that is a Democratic president getting things done with a Republican Congress.
Right.
This guy's got a Democratic Senate, and he can't get the bill through.
Last word. Go ahead, Pat.
He can't. The thing is that he doesn't apply himself. He looks for political issues. He does public posturing. No. I didn't say he's lazy. He does public posturing for political purposes and thinks he's doing something.
Greg, nobody is putting the greater good first, the president, the Republicans.
Or
nobody.
common sense.
You're
or
right,
common
Pat.
sense.
Absolutely right, Pat.
I think he's addicted to the teleprompter and the adoring crowd.
He should go see his Idols movie, the movie Lincoln, where Lincoln in the movie is portrayed. He would go high with the Emancipation Proclamation. He'd go low. He would dig up dirt on congressmen and squeeze them into absolutely.
But he achieved the end through whatever means necessary.
And right now, the end isn't being achieved.
Doug, Schoen, Pat Caddell, John LeBoutillier, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You can catch our political insiders every Monday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, live.foxnews.com, and they will be back here next Sunday. And you can also follow them on Twitter, FN Insiders.